a large success of World War II was predicated on the U.S. industrial base's ability to pivot and deliver for the war effort.
Yeah.
We walk into COVID and we can't produce cotton swabs, and just illustrated how atrophied the manufacturing mindset and ecosystem had become, and when we saw the need for it and we were losing the retiring generation.
So one of the things I've mentioned to nearly everybody about manufacturing is that it could use the Hollywood treatment or a reality show or something that shows it in a positive light. And it turns out that there is a reality show about manufacturing, and it is a competition. It pits community colleges and high school shop programs against each other for highly skilled machining. It's called Project MFG, and its founder, Ray Dick, had a passion for this. He had a career in academia, he worked for industry, but I think he knew that his real calling was to help young people find satisfaction and value in working with their hands. So with some collaborators, he set out to make this competition, and it has evolved spectacularly over the last couple of years. Ray Dick joins me next on the Manufacturing Report. Hey, Ray, welcome to the Manufacturing Report podcast.
Hey, thank you, Scott. I look forward to our conversation here today.
Well, likewise, you're doing some great things. Project MFG, Clash of Trades, we'll get into all of that. But before we do, I'm wondering if you could share with our listeners a little bit about you and your path to eventually ending up with the Clash of Trades and Project MFG.
Yeah, so it's been a very circuitous path for myself. Just as a formal background, I'm an engineer. You know, we're in the trade space. I got a PhD or Doctor of Engineering. And so I'm an engineer, have been in education, engineering education for many years in previous times, but have been in manufacturing for probably 25, 30 years now in different capacities, from running a small shop, product shop, to Department of Energy in manufacturing. And so, you know, the trade space, if you will, you know, comes natural from my background, you know, making things and being in manufacturing. But really, project manufacturing and the whole Clash of Trades, the mission we're on now, evolved after I left the Department of Energy and kind of hung out a single shingle and was spending a lot of time working the community, if you will. And a friend of mine who turned out being our primary customer, you know, had this crazy idea that wanted a competition for manufacturing. And I had left my corporate job, actually cashed out my retirement, started a nonprofit, because what I was going out to Palo Alto a lot, and it was just disturbing to me how much advantage some folks had when others didn't. You know, had friends that went to school at Palo Alto High School, for example. You know, they didn't even know what advantage they had. There was so much of it. And coming back to the Midwest, where my kids were in school, and where, you know, college education at Stanford wasn't your critical path, you know, always, you know, there was a lot of different paths, and really came out with, you know, how can we help people find their ikigai, which is purpose for being, Japanese word, because I found mine in the desire to enable career paths for young people and transitioning people that maybe aren't on the normal beaten path of society, if you will. You know, how do you get the urban core into career paths that resonate with them? How do you get the rural communities into career paths that resonate with them, and not be, you know, pre-confined or predictive in terms of what was right for anybody? You know, help the individual explore what was right for them. And so finding that ikigai for me really launched my path into project manufacturing and the manufacturing trade education space as well. And never looked back. I've never had more fun in my life, and I would never change anything other than I would love it to be more so we could help more people.
That is fantastic. I wanted to say, you know, I had a couple thoughts about this. One is that, you know, there have been, and we'll get into the Clash of Trades, which is a kind of a fun, you know, reality competition. But, there've been shows that have touched on manufacturing before, like John Ratzenberger had this look inside of factories, but it took you inside the factory, told interesting stories. So you had kind of like the how things were made aspect of it. I suppose there have been some other takes on that, but what this to me like elevates it, because I've been to a lot of high schools that have like manufacturing programs, but they all feel very isolated, right? They don't feel part of a community. Um, and it's like, they feel like they're off on their own. And so you've created like a space for this. So I'm wondering, I mean, you said you found your purpose in this, but I guess what was the spark that said, you know what, we're going to stand up this organization and try to put a show on video that is going to be compelling? What was that?
Yeah, so there's a collision of multiple things happened, with project manufacturing, then subsequently the clash of trade. And so in the nexus or impetus for project manufacturing, it was Adele Ratcliffe is the individual. She was the director of the Industrial Base Analysis and Sustainment Program at the Department of Defense. And Adele's mindset was she come out of the Southeast, Mississippi, the SEC conference, competition is so hot in the Southeast. And she just
Indeed.
wanted this competition because she knew America would compete if we had a way to do it. And so we launched project manufacturing as a prototype exercise in the Southeast, in Louisiana, Alabama, and Mississippi was our first three events. And we found out we had something. I mean, what really came out of those early prototypes was Adele was absolutely right. People love to compete. That was clear based on the participation we had, the enthusiasm that it garnered quickly. And the other thing we learned really quickly is, we went out and did 5-axis machining as a baseline competition. And I wish I had saved a nickel for every time somebody said, you cannot do that. Our education system cannot support that. And we were too dumb to know better. We weren't traditional educators. We weren't traditional, machining folks. And it's like, yeah, sure we can. Watch us.
Yeah.
And we did. And what we saw was a hunger by the students for that type of challenge. They would step into the game, they would give it their best. And at the end of the day, everybody won because they were getting upskill. And so that passion, sparked early with project manufacturing and really came out of, pushing the envelopes on what you could do in a quasi-educational setting and recognizing that we wanted to be different. We made it as true to life on the shop floor as you can. So as a machinist or as an engineer on the shop floor, I learned the machinist always had a better way than the engineers, and engineers always screwed up. That was just my life. And so we did engineering change orders in our competitions to reflect the nature of a dynamic work environment. We pushed cost functions into the competition to reflect the real world. And so to your point, that started building a community that was more driven by the manufacturing floor than the educational classroom. That was kind of the nexus. And then, we launched right before COVID, a year before COVID, and COVID hit. And it's like, oh my God, we can't do competitions anymore. We can't go and have these live events at the scale we want. And it was like, well, shoot, we'll just do and my partner, Bill Ross, I give him the credit for the idea. We'll just put it on YouTube. We'll just do a YouTube show. And so that year we came out with the first Clash of Trades. Bill and a crew of, I think, 10 went on a tour bus in the middle of COVID. We'd go into facilities under the restrictions of the site, which is, 3 or 4 people, a small production crew that could get in, have the competitors compete, and then brought all the video back and post-produced it here in Kansas City. And that's where we really found out, there was a way to get to an audience differently with the mindset of a manufacturing shop-oriented competition that could create the homegrown heroes and has really grown into what the Clash of Trades is.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. And I want to take a big step back because, whether or not someone's interested in machining or welding, the fact is that this is both a kind of like an economic and national security issue for the United States, where this is a big part of our industrial base, of our defense industrial base. For a number of years now, there have been these challenges of getting young people and others kind of engaged in all of this as the incumbents have been kind of like aging out. Um, and so you obviously saw that and were able to lift this up and kind of dispel some of the notions that this is like dead end or uninteresting or what have you, I think.
Yeah, we were very, very fortunate. When Adele finally gave us the green light to proceed with the prototype, she was the director of the program, and she's been our primary funding source through that office from the beginning. We were right at the nexus of the conversation of around, the baby boomers aging out. We're losing it. Right at the nexus of, in the 70s and 80s, we went to a low-cost manufacturing model, which outsourced overseas every capability we possibly could because it was cheaper, not because it was better quality. And so we went through that. At the same time as my generation, your generation, and the younger folks came up, college was the way to success. That was a path
Right.
to success for everybody. And so, then we had this waking moment to like, oh my gosh, we don't have a secure supply chain. Oh my gosh, we got communities that are dying because manufacturing is dying. So there's economic impact, real world impacts happening day in and day out. And then when COVID hit, a friend of mine who was an early advisor of ours, a gentleman named Dr. Arthur Herman, wrote a book called Freedom's Forge. And it postulates that a large success of World War II was predicated on the U.S. industrial base's ability to pivot and deliver for the
Absolutely.
war effort. Yeah. We walk into COVID and we can't produce cotton swabs. We can't pivot to cotton swabs. And it just illustrated how atrophied the manufacturing mindset and ecosystem had become at a time when we saw the need for it and we were losing the retiring generation. And so, again, project manufacturing was very lucky to be at the nexus of that conversation at the Department of Defense when it was happening and when it was growing. Adele's portfolio has grown 1,000 times from what it was when we launched. All the notoriety we see about the workforce issues at the national scale. She's been at the middle of that, and we've just been very lucky. I feel very fortunate to be in those conversations and to really have seen communities invest in manufacturing education, to your point, as an economic development driver for that region.
Yeah.
And it's just it is an economic security issue for regions, and having a secure supply chain for our defense industrial base is critical to national security. There's just no other way about it.
So let me ask you, because it's one thing to have an idea to put on a show like this, and it's a very well produced reality show. I mean, you have a host, you have like color commentary. You build up drama, you have these kids, you tell their stories. And so that I imagine, as like you have a PhD in mechanical engineering and not in TV production. So how did all of that kind of come about? What's the back end of all of this?
So that is a great question. So I'm going to attribute our back end to what I learned in my work at the national security community, because I worked for the Department of Energy and National Security. What you quickly recognize in national security is there's a need to know, and if you don't know, you may not need to, but people do know. And so it was really about surrounding our organization with entities that did know production. Yeah. And so ATS out in LA was our first. Well, we had a production team before that. If you watch our very first episode that we did in the warehouse here in Kansas City, we had a good production team. Had a good host. Stephanie Quayle was the host that year. It was a good launch for us because the one thing we felt we could control was production quality.
Sure.
And so regardless of content, we were kind of figuring out the content approach. And if you watch the evolution of the show, we veered way off into artificially induced drama a couple years ago that was just like, oh my God, what are we doing? And we brought it back the last couple of years. But we've always been very driven to have a production quality that reflected, again, the prestige that we want to reflect on the competitors and the homegrown heroes. And so we reached out to some folks in LA to help us do that, and they've been great. Mike Woodward and his team have just been amazing. We've had some producers that I don't want to say where they've worked, but have worked on major programs in Hollywood and in the TV sector. So
it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's the key, and we've done this all along. I started as a one-man show. It was me. We got almost 20 employees now, and we found people to fit the functions we needed as we've grown and have surrounded the organization with the expertise to really deliver at the quality and scale that we want to.
Yeah. Well, I think you've nailed it, for sure. So, could you share, Ray, a couple of the different type of crafts and skills that you're trying to elevate through project manufacturing? Because I mean, we've been talking about the clash of trades, and there's a lot of like machining involved there, but there are some other skills. I mean, and not just machining, but additive manufacturing too. But I'm wondering if you can just walk through some of those for our listeners, some of the skills you're elevating here.
Yeah, absolutely. Project manufacturing started with just a single competition line, and we called it the Advanced Manufacturing Competition. And it still exists today as our premier event. And in our premier event, we work to identify a product line, if you will, and then bring to bear those resources necessary for that product line. Mm-hmm. So I think 2 years ago when we were at the Haas Racing facility outside of Charlotte, it was race car parts, a plenum on an engine that required machining and welding, TIG welding specifically on aluminum, high quality, and then some measurement sciences because you got to have quality in the produced parts.
Right.
This past year, we did a space-based theme that did not have the welding, but had additive manufacturing. And again, we try to identify competition projects that naturally fit together into a promotional or story arc that we can highlight the individuals in those particular trades. And so that was kind of the nexus of it. We've had metrology, measurement sciences, we've had additive, we've had obviously advanced machining and welding in that collection to date. But out of those, we saw a continued need to stress test individual lines of effort. So we have, at the machining side, we've came out with our National Machining League, which is it doesn't do 5-axis, it does 3+2, 3+some, predominantly for high school students, so that we can get people excited, can highlight, younger career paths for even younger people. We've done that. We've done welding. We've got 2 welding series now. Our first welding series started out with the maritime because, the Navy and their submarine program is such a critical national security issue. And all up and down the coast, the East Coast and down to Mississippi, welding is such a critical technical field that needs to be filled. And so we started a whole maritime series that has, I think there's 9 or 10 locational competitions that roll up into a national event. Recognized that maritime wasn't all welding and had great conversations with the Department of Defense about, well, if we're filling the maritime ones, but we're robbing these guys, it's just a matter of time before these guys go back and rob the maritime. So we need to elevate everybody. And so we came out with the National Welding League, which gives us a chance to do a large scale integrated welding competition that rolls up into a national. We've done additive this past year. We did our first, deep dive into true additive competition to take the maker space into the manufacturing sector. It's funny. Everybody says additive manufacturing and making are the same thing, but at the end of the day, I don't know if I know of a single additive part that wasn't post-processed. And so, being able to change the conversation from I'm a maker in my maker space to I'm a manufacturing who takes advantage of additive manufacturing techniques is part of our educational quest we're on, because there is post-processing. We have opportunities. We've had discussions about doing, of all things, optical grinding competition.
Oh, interesting.
Forging and casting competitions and post-processing. What really directs us in our competition paradigm is, where's large skill gaps exist at a scale that can create an excitement in the community to help drive young people into it.
Nice.
I don't know that we've ever said no to anything. Some have just been slower to start than others, and we continue to work the pipeline to advance many fronts on the trade space.
Yeah, I think that's great. Ray, one of the things I wanted to ask you, because I think the popular myths out there is that, in addition to there's no quote unquote shop classes or things like that anymore. I mean, you're bringing kids from high school here, so that's obviously not the case, but it's basically that no one wants to do this, right? And, and so is it like pulling teeth finding these teams, or is it just more like the fact that there isn't this connectivity yet, and you have to kind of go out and fish a little bit for it. How have you found that?
Yeah. So capturing competitors for our program sponsors and the whole ecosystem that it really takes, they're out there. I mean, it's
Yeah.
a matter of fishing in a pond that is pretty well stocked. It's, you have to go in and be able to say, well, here's why you ought to participate. It's sad but true. Everything has a value business proposition. And, at the schools, one of our value propositions for the schools is sharing best practices. You're going to get better. Part of the value proposition, especially in our National Machining League, is we're doing a hub and spoke network. And so we're having a competition at a trade training community college where we're inviting the schools to participate in their radius that they recruit from. So we're helping bring people in. And
Yeah,
so,
smart. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of tools we use to entice people to participate. But once they come in, we found them to be very very hungry for doing it. Again, I taught graduate engineering for 11 years, and I swear to God, I would never teach anything again in my life. I just got to the point where I did not enjoy it. I did not have a great time with students at that level in their career where they were coming back into education. And I will tell you today, the trade training students I meet at the high school, community college, and even some of the advanced manufacturing engineering students, they will inspire hope in America and American manufacturing and made in America. It has been transformational for me, the people I've met.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the way you put that. One thing I wanted to ask you about, because this is, I think, an ongoing challenge, and I've had other guests on the show from the manufacturing space that have expressed this as well, and it's dealing with what I would say is the gender imbalance in manufacturing. And I will say I have seen some female, team members as part of this, but I'm wondering what, you all might have had conversations about that, but how, how to think about widening, widening the pool of potential talent to be even more inclusive, because you said at the outset, one of the goals is to reach into the places that have been underserved.
Yes.
Absolutely. So I appreciate any thoughts.
Yeah, so we do have a line of effort that's non-competition based, and we call them discovery events. And when we have a live event in any community, be it a welding competition, a machining, additive, whatever the reason, or we're landing in a community, we have these discovery events. Excuse me. And these are where we bring in regional manufacturers to talk to middle schoolers. I mean, literally 8, 9, 10, 11-year-olds. And I'll go back to Wichita, Kansas. We had our national final there, I think 3 years ago. And we were having a discovery event, and Adele was there. Now, again, I can't overemphasize the partnership we've had with the department and Adele personally. And she was talking at the discovery event and turned the conversation into there's a home for everybody, and everybody has a home in manufacturing. I had a great example of a young woman who was in dental hygienist school at a community college, and right across the hallway was the weld shop. And literally one day she had her hand, and she tells the story, had her hands in somebody's mouth doing training, and said, I don't want to do this anymore, and welding looks cool. Quit that class and went over and joined the welding program, and it turned out to be a great welder.
Yeah.
There is a home for everybody in the advanced manufacturing. And what we really, and this is another thing we do to break that barrier. SWIC 2 years ago, and again this year, we were at Southwest Illinois College for a competition, regional and finals. We have a certain economic impact into an area when we bring one of our bigger competitions. We cater in food, we have local transportation, all the things that go with an event. We started using the culinary schools at the community colleges to feed our teams and our groups. Because it's a way, because one case I made, and it gets to a home for everybody, if you think of a large manufacturer, so I was at Honeywell for 9 years.
Yeah.
Manufacturing, guess what? It had a doctor, medical staff. It had a cafeteria staff.
Yeah.
It had a
Yeah.
maintenance staff. It had lawn care. You know,
Right.
manufacturing doesn't exist without the whole ecosystem.
Right.
And so in an entire ecosystem, there is a home for everybody.
Yeah.
And another thing we've done to help with the young people is we call them middle school throwdowns. And this shout out goes to Shannon Amore, I hope I said her name right, with Weld Like a Girl. We bring in a collection of 10 to 20 homeschooled middle school students, partner them with a subject matter expert in plasma cutting in the morning and welding in the afternoon.
Okay.
And we have these middle school kids, you know, all gender, everybody's welcome, come in, and in the morning they run a plasma cutter, in the afternoon they weld up a doghouse. And I will tell you, the excitement and enthusiasm of a 9 or 10-year-old running a plasma cutter is infectious. But it's all those things, and recognizing that. I told this to Adele years ago. If we're going to go after the usual fish, we're never going to solve the problem. We got to find a new fishing hole, and that has to include everybody. And we've been very fortunate to have a pretty wide net, and continue to really strive to be inclusive across all sectors.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's reflected. Ray, I wanted to ask you, because, you know, from, you know, you've actualized this, you know, COVID obviously was a hiccup, but it's back up and running, and, you know, it's an engaging show. For you, what's your definition of success with Clash of Trades and project manufacturing?
Yeah, definition of success is a really hard topic, because I don't know if we can be successful until manufacturing has earned its right back in the American economy that it used to have. I mean, if I look at my generation, when I was young, probably 90% of my kids' dads were in manufacturing. You know, they were machinists, they were tool and die makers, they were logisticians for manufacturing. That was 90% of the community I came out of. You know, success for me is when we stop having the college, not college conversation. When we start recognizing made in America means quality, means a fair product at a good price of outstanding quality. It means the individual, regardless of any background characteristics, anything, is comfortable coming into the trades. To me, that's success. And the hard part is, I will probably never see that type of success, but I think project manufacturing can play and Clash of Trades can play its own role in driving towards that success.
Yeah. Well, I think that you've offered a really amazing definition there. I'd like to think that we've turned the corner, you know, that maybe we hit bottom during COVID, and, you know, we've stopped digging the hole and we're starting to get out of it. And I know from a policy point of view, I see aspects of that. I mean, I think some people care about it, but even more importantly, and I think this is one of the things that you play a key role in, from a cultural perspective, and kind of like normalizing the idea that being in the trades is cool and offers a great career path, and even gets you on TV, right? Is pretty amazing.
Yeah, so I agree completely with what you said there, Scott. You know, part of what we do is take a temperature, if you will, of the community and build lessons learned. And some of my last conversations with Adele just in the last couple months, you know, we got into this mess by college or bust. Yeah, we can't paint the picture today that it's manufacturing or bust. You know, we really have to have the mindset that there is a home for everybody. If you want to go to college and beautiful, conquer world hunger. Great. If that's not the path you choose, there is a home in other places that is equally fantastic and impactful as that. And we just can't go back and say, well, I'm a machinist or I'm in manufacturing. You should have went to manufacturing. It really does have to be, I'm going to go full circle back to the Ikigai. If we can get people engaged in what they're passionate about, there'll be stickiness and there'll be excellence.
I think that's a great sentiment. Yeah.